When Sid and Eric walked through the door of the old man's little terraced house, it wasn't clear who was more pleased to see them, the animals or Bessie. Sid's #1 fan had been waiting up in her pink frilly nightdress all night for their return. "Sydney!" she exclaimed, powering down the corridor, heading straight for him. The lady bustled past the animals and launched herself at her love. Her eyes were open wide in shock as she wrapped herself round him. "Thank the Lord you are safe." "I was," he said, struggling to breathe as she was holding him so tight. Such was the force that Sid's tin legs couldn't take it. They rocked backwards and the pair tumbled to the floor. Bessie ended up sitting on top of Sid, who was spread out on the floorboards. "Oh, Sydney, you old devil!" Eric chuckled to himself. "Can someone please help me up?" demanded Sid. Eric helped Bessie to her feet first, and then they both helped the old man to his tin feet. "I didn't enjoy that. I could hardly breathe," spluttered Sid. Next he greeted his animal children. They were all so pleased to see him. It was quite something, being pawed at, nuzzled and licked by a parrot, a baby elephant, a seal, a flamingo, a crocodile, an enormously bottomed baboon, and bringing up the rear, a giant tortoise, all at once. "I've missed you, my beauties," said Sid. "Oh, I know who this is," cooed Bessie on seeing the gorilla. "Isn't she glorious?" "This is the newest member of our family," announced the boy. "Meet Gertrude." The gorilla began greeting all the other animals as if they were old friends. Some she might have remembered from the zoo, others she was meeting for the first time. No matter, she showered them all with love and kisses and cuddles. "Who would ever want to hurt this magnificent lady?" exclaimed Bessie. "Now, what does Gertrude like to eat? I could cook her up a nice welcoming treat." "Bananas are her favourite." "No bananas, I'm afraid. There is a war on." "Raisins?" "I've just baked a fruit and nut cake that has a ton of raisins in it." "Yummy, I'm sure she'd love that," exclaimed the boy. Eagerly, Gertrude nodded her head and licked her lips. "And I would too," said Sid. "Oh, and a nice cup of cocoa." "Oh, well, if you're doing cocoa and cake, I would love some too, please. I'm starving," added the boy. "Let me get cracking," said Bessie as she bustled out of the back door. The boy slumped down on a chair in the kitchen and yawned. "I'll have my cocoa and cake and go straight to bed," said Eric. The old man's eyes flashed with fear. "What?" asked the boy. "We can't stay here," said Sid. "Why not?" "They'll be on to us." "Who?" "Everyone. They might have already called the coppers. And then there's the air raid warden out there. She'll wake up soon, and she knows exactly where I live." "How come?" "I pointed at the house." "Oh, yes, that wasn't too clever." "Wasn't too clever?" repeated Parker, the one-winged parrot, who was perched on Eric's shoulder. "Shush you," said Sid. "Shush you," the parrot repeated. "Cheeky little so-and-so, isn't she?" chuckled Sid. "Where can we go?" asked the boy. "We need to get out of London. A fully grown gorilla is far too big for this little house anyway. No offence, Gertrude." The gorilla, who was busy pulling fleas out of Botty the baboon's fur and eating them, looked back at him and shrugged. "We need somewhere with open spaces so she can lollop around to her heart's content." Eric had never been out of the city in his short life. Some of the other children at his school bragged about day trips to the seaside, and Eric had always wanted to go. It was something his mum and dad often talked about, but alas, it was not to be. "How about we take Gertrude to the seaside?" suggested Eric. "In December?" spluttered the old man. "It'll be blowing a gale." "No, you're right. Stupid idea," he replied, downcast. Suddenly Sid's face brightened. "It's not a stupid idea, it's a brilliant idea. No one else will be visiting the seaside at this time of year. We'll have the place to ourselves. There's an old guest house I used to stay at way back when I was a boy. In the last century it was. Oh, I loved it. It was just outside Bognor Regis up on a hill, and from there I could see all the British warships going to and from Portsmouth Harbour. I went back there just before war broke out to take a trip down memory lane, but it was all boarded up. It will be the perfect place for us to hide out." "Brilliant. What's it called?" asked the boy. "Seaview Towers," said Sid. "Seaview Towers," repeated Parker, the parrot. So, over cocoa and fruit and nut cake, which was mostly wolfed down by the animals, Sid and Eric started to put together the latest part of their mission, Codename Bananas. It was now nearly midnight, and the police could come knocking at any moment. It was decided they should depart at dawn for the seaside with Gertrude, leaving the parrot, the baby elephant, the seal, the flamingo, the crocodile, the giant tortoise, and of course the enormously bottomed baboon to stay with Bessie next door. The problem was, how was Sid and Eric going to get Gertrude to the seaside? From London, Bognor Regis was a good 50 miles or so away. Sid didn't own a car, neither did Bessie, nor, of course, did Eric. Or Gertrude, for that matter. Gorillas just can't get the insurance. It was far too far to walk, especially if you had old tin legs like Sid, so a train seemed the best option. How could they smuggle a gorilla onto a train without anyone noticing? On the corner of the kitchen, Eric spotted a battered old wheelchair. "Maybe we can use that," he exclaimed. "For me?" asked Sid. "No, for Gertrude. The hospital gave that wheelchair to me after the war. The nurses said I should use it if ever I needed to take the weight off these tin legs of mine. We could push Gertrude in it. But everyone would still be able to see she's a gorilla. Then we need to disguise her." "As what? An orangutan?" "No," said Eric, "that would just be plain silly." "Nobody will be looking for an escaped orangutan," reasoned Sid. "All we need to do is smother her in marmalade, then she'll all be all orange." Gertrude pulled a sour face. She didn't like that idea one little bit. "We need to disguise Gertrude as a person," stated Eric. They both turned to look at the gorilla, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, demolishing the fruit and nut cake Bessie had brought round. Gertrude then rose to her feet and pattered round the floor on all fours, scratching her bottom as she hunted for crumbs. "How on earth are we going to do that?" asked Sid. "We need to dress her up." "We can dress her up as much as we like, but what about that face of hers? Beautiful though it is, it's a bit of a giveaway. It's very gorilla-ish." "You're right," mused the boy. "Maybe she could wear a gas mask." "I don't think she's going to like that," said Sid. "It's worth a try." Everyone in Britain had been issued with a gas mask because of the fear of a poison gas attack. So Eric picked up Sid's from the kitchen table and tried to fit it over Gertrude's face. Unsurprisingly, the gorilla immediately yanked off the mask and hurled it across the room. Luckily, Parker the parrot ducked just in time. The gas mask hit a framed photograph on the wall. The boy winced. "Not my best idea," he admitted. The gorilla nodded her head in agreement. Eric went over to pick up the photograph. It was an old, faded, black and white image of a much younger Sid on his wedding day. He was standing proudly next to his bride, Aunt Hilda, who was wearing a veil. Sid's wife Hilda had become ill and died many years before, but he had many remembrances of her all over the house. "How about we put Gertrude in a wedding dress?" exclaimed the boy. Sid spat out his cocoa. It sprayed all over Botty the baboon, who scurried up the net curtains. "A wedding dress?" thundered Sid. "Why would we put Gertrude in a wedding dress? Then she could have a veil like Aunt Hilda's to cover her face." The old man fell silent for a moment. "That's not a bad idea." "Thank you," replied the boy proudly. "But where are we going to get a wedding dress from at this late hour? Might Bessie have one?" "I doubt it. Bessie's not been married." "Not yet," teased the boy cheekily. "Steady on," said Sid. "Maybe she could make us one." "Out of what?" The boy stood up, stepped over the crocodile and made his way to the window. There he took hold of the net curtain and wrapped it around himself. "Out of this." It was long and white and crumply, not unlike a wedding dress. "Clever boy," chirped Sid. The baboon leapt down off the curtain rail and squatted on the boy's head. "Not now, Botty," said Eric, lifting her off and placing her on the table. Just then Bessie bustled through the back door, carrying a tray piled high with biscuits. "Here you are, my love," she cooed, and immediately all the animals surged towards her, eager to be fed. "Oh, steady, one at a time," she exclaimed. "Bessie," began Sid, "we need you to help us with something, please." "Anything for you, Sydney, you know that." "I need you to help me make a wedding dress." Tears welled in the woman's eyes. Oh, I never thought this day would come. She rushed over and embraced him, planting kisses all over his face. I will marry you, Sidney. We can be together for all eternity and beyond. Sid gulped. As politely as he could, Sid unhooked Bessie from him. No, no, he spluttered. The wedding dress is not for you. So, you've got another woman. Would you care to tell me the name of this floozy? She demanded. It's Gertrude. The lady looked mightily confused and more than a little disgusted. You're going to marry a monkey? Gorillas are apes, corrected an irritated Eric. You're going to marry an ape? No, snapped Sid. No one is marrying anyone. We're going to disguise Gertrude as a bride. Whatever for? So she can have a veil covering her face, said Eric. Then no one will know she's a gorilla. Well, that is clever, very clever indeed. Of course I'll help. Let's get to work. That's exactly what they did. They tore down the net curtains, measured Gertrude, and set about making her the prettiest wedding dress they could. As the sun began to rise over a smouldering London, the bridal outfit was complete. It comprised a parasol, a hat, a veil, a dress, a fan, and a pair of lacy-looking white gloves. Sid's slippers. These were the only shoes that fitted Gertrude's ginormous feet at a huge stretch. They could only bribe Gertrude to be dressed in all this with one thing, more fruit and nut cake. As the gorilla demolished another of Bessie's delicious homemade treats, the three could fuss around her, getting her ready for the train trip to the seaside. She's never looked lovelier, cooed Sid. What a beautiful bride. I always cry at weddings, blubbed Bessie. It's not an actual wedding, said Sid. It's just a disguise. Now, sit down, old girl. With that, he gently sat the cake-munching gorilla down in the wheelchair. Now, Uncle Sid, you have to dress like the groom. Me? Yes, you can pretend you two just got married, and if anyone stops you and asks, you just say you're going to the seaside for your honeymoon. No buts, Sidney, said Bessie sternly. Listen to the boy. He's a good deal smarter than you. Go upstairs and put your best suit on. Harumph, harumphed Sid. What about the boy? Oh, yes, agreed Bessie. He'll need a cover too. Eric shifted uncomfortably. I know, you can be a pretty little page boy. What's a page boy? Asked Eric. It's like a boy bridesmaid. No, thank you, he snapped. Now, come on, everyone's getting into character. You need to too. What do page boys wear? Normally Victorian sailor suits. No, shouted Eric. Let me see what I can rustle up. I'll be back in a jiffy. Eric barely had time to sulk before Bessie popped back to her house next door and returned with a rag bag of what looked like her own undergarments. I'm not wearing any of that, puffed the boy. Wait, let me work my magic. In a moment she had adorned him in various frilly lace bits and bobs. He looked like some sort of silly little toff from the olden days. I'm not wearing this, he grumbled again. There's no time to argue, said Bessie. Just then there was a thunderous banging on the door. Oh no, hissed Eric. Sid was still upstairs getting changed into his wedding suit. Shall I open it? Asked the boy. No, no, just say silent and maybe whoever it will be will just go away. The knock was louder this time. Don't say a word, whispered Bessie. We can hear you in there, called a voice through the letterbox. It sounded an awful lot like Miss Nina Misra. Open this door at once or we'll be forced to break it down. All right then, we will. Hide, hissed Bessie. Don't worry, I'm coming, I'm coming. She shut the kitchen door behind her. Eric knelt down at it so he could spy through the keyhole. From there he could see Bessie answer the door to the air raid warden. This time she was not alone. She was flanked by two policemen. All had grave expressions on their face. Yes, can I help you? Asked Bessie innocently as she possibly could, which was not that innocently. She was too nice to be good at lying. The warden looked confused to see this lady answer the door. Is there an old man, a young boy, and a lady dressed as a gorilla who lives here? Let me think, replied Bessie. No, just me. I live here all alone, no husband, no son. Definitely nobody dressed as a gorilla. I'm sure I'd remember that. Sorry, but you've got the wrong house. Good night. She went to close the door, but the warden put her boot in the way. Not so fast, she said. We heard another voice through the letterbox, a squawky-sounding one. Who was that? I don't know what you're talking about, lied Bessie. Now I really must get to bed. Get to bed, repeated Parker. There it is. It's just an echo, lied Bessie. See, there it goes again. Now I really am very tired, so please let's call it a night. If I do see an old man, a young boy, and of course anyone dressed up as a gorilla, you'll be the first to know. Bessie tried to close the front door again, but the warden put a heavy hand up against it. You don't mind if I have a quick look around the house, do you? Bessie could protest no more. The warden, flanked by the two policemen, marched into the hallway. We'll start in there, said the warden, pointing to the kitchen door. Hiding behind the door on his knees, the boy gulped. They were all done for.